So as I'm potting on a lot of the seedlings I did before I went on holiday, you can see that these tomatoes are very leggy. These ones aren't so bad, but these ones are quite leggy. So I'll just show you how I plant these up, and you don't really have to worry too much. I'm going to be putting these into individual pots. And these tomatoes are I've put in early because they're different sorts. One's a dwarf, so it only grows to about a foot and a half, 18 inches probably. And this one is a hanging basket one, and that is called Tumbling Tom. And the small one is called Red Robin. So I'll show you the Tumbling Tom just because they are a lot taller than the other ones. So I'll take out some of these tomatoes. So here we are. Well, helps if the stick isn't in the way. So you can see it's a pretty leggy tomato. So I just make a nice deep hole. They'll be individually potted up into pots. So I just lift the roots a bit because it will allow it to go further down. There you go. So now the leggy tomato is looking lovely. I'm going to do all of these. And they will, even though they're leggy. And the other thing I meant to say is that, let me just get one of these tomatoes. Tomatoes are very tolerant, and when you pot it up, so when that goes into the ground, I've lost some of the roots, they will take out roots all the way up the stem like that. So all of this, so even though I've got only a small bit of root on here, which isn't ideal, once I've potted this up, roots will come out of here as well, like that. So when you put it into there, you get plenty of roots and it will romp away. So don't be too worried about leggy tomatoes, but with all things, it's always better that you don't have them leggy. But that's how it is, so we'll just get on and deal with them. They're salvageable. So I've potted up these tumbling tomatoes now, and they're just in regular 3-inch pot, plastic pots, and some multi-purpose compost. And as you can see, they look really nice. So they'll grow away now and they'll be strong and healthy, and they don't look like they were ever leggy. So that's how you solve your leggy tomato problem. Hi there, and today I'm going to be sowing my tomatoes. It is rather late, but I've been on holiday and came back to lots of work to do, and I don't mind growing them a little bit late because they will catch up, and they're going to be planted outside and not in a greenhouse. And before, last year, I remember I planted a load of tomatoes, and it didn't start to warm up until very late in the season, so the tomatoes were kind of stuck inside the greenhouse waiting for some warmth. And then I got a backlog of crops wanting to actually be in the greenhouse, like my sweet corns and things like that. So I don't actually mind it being a bit late, because although the plants, if it does warm up and they can go outside, the plants might be small, but they will catch up very quickly. And they probably won't go out for, where are we, March, April, May. Yeah, we've got a few months, so I think that they'll be a really good size. So anyway, I'm not going to fret. Anybody that grows tomatoes will know that there is an awful lot of varieties out there. And as you start to grow tomatoes, you start collecting an awful lot of varieties. And it's really, really hard to decide what to grow. Firstly, depending on what you do with them, if you grow too many, what do you do with them? But you just can't help popping them in the pots. So I've tried to control myself, but as you'll see from this video, I haven't controlled myself very well. But I split mine up into the cherries that I want to grow, the kind of mid-size tomatoes for sort of salads and other things that you just want to slice up, and then the big beef tomatoes. So I'm just going to go through some of those varieties with you and then show you how I sort of sow them and deal with them. I'm also going to show you a selection of tomatoes that I'm choosing to grow for the food bank, and also whatever ones are left over we can sell to raise some money for seeds for the project as well. So I'm going to start off with the food bank tomato seeds that I've selected for this year. So I'll kick off with those. In the main, what we found last year and the last few years is that people prefer to take the tomatoes that they're more familiar with. So I'm growing Gardener's Delight, and that's a good kind of mid-cherry type of tomato, very reliable and sweet. So I'm going some of those. I'm growing some Alice Craig, which is a slightly bigger tomato, but again, people know it's a reliable tomato. So that's the Alice Craigs. Moneymaker, again, is a very common and popular tomato, so I've got some of these. And I'm also putting in some Crimson Crush and some Cocktail Crush. That's because these are meant to be blight resistant, and not last year but the year before, all of my tomatoes were wiped out for early blight because we had such a wet spring and early summer that they got blight very early, and before we could even really get a tomato off the plants, they had blight and we had to take them all out. So to try to protect that from the food bank, I'm growing some blight resistant, because they're never blight free, but blight resistant. And one that I'm growing for myself as well that I found was blight resistant is one called Honeymoon. And so out of all my tomatoes, the only one left standing was Honeymoon. So I do grow a couple of these for the just in case. It's my backstop, but I'll tell you a bit more about those when I show you my selection for myself. And because somebody gave me this packet of seeds, I'm going to pop in some Big Daddy, because this isn't a variety that I would grow normally. I've got the seeds. I'll just put them in, see what comes up, and we'll put them in the allotment for the food bank. So they're really the main ones, but I always grow too many for myself anyway, because I always put a few extra seeds in, which either I sell or they go into the food bank, so they will have quite a variety of other things to supplement that. But those tomatoes are the core for the food bank. It's very familiar to people. That I know that the volunteers at the food bank get some very strange looks and comments when they come up with different colours and different shapes and different sizes, but we still want them to experience those and have the opportunity to taste them and use them. So some of the ones I'm going to show you in a minute will be included in that batch. So firstly, I'm going to show you the cherry tomatoes that I'm going to grow. And everybody's, well not everybody's, but a lot of people's favourites is Sun Gold, which I grow every year, and it's been a staple of my tomato growing for many years. The slight downside to Sun Gold, that it can crack, the skin can crack, and then once it's cracked, people don't like the look of it, so it's not always the prettiest tomato. The upside is that they crop early and they can go on for a long time, particularly if you pop a couple in the greenhouse, which is what I'm going to do this year. I don't normally grow tomatoes in the greenhouse, but I'm going to pop a couple in so that it extends the season and we have some tomatoes later on in the year. So Sun Gold, and because of the cracking, the splitting of the skins, sometimes that's because you've had a heavy rainfall and the skins crack, but sometimes that seems to be a little bit of a problem, whether it's raining or not, with that variety. So to support that, I grow a variety called Honeycomb, and Honeycomb, they don't seem to crack at all, and I think that they're almost just as sweet as the Sun Gold. And I have been trying to move over to Honeycomb, but my loyalty to Sun Gold is very strong, so they'll still go in. The next one is Bream's yellow tomato, and this is like a kind of pear-shaped one, bright yellow, and I like that because it adds colour to the selection of cherry tomatoes that we have. Then I grow a very sweet red tomato, and the one that I normally get is the Sun Cherry Premium, and this is very delicious red tomato. Very much like Sun Gold, just a red version, very prolific, very yummy. Not many of them get back to the house because you just go along, you pick them and pop them in your mouth. They're delicious. I also grow a cherry called Shimmer, and that's a kind of, it's red with sort of greeny stripes on it. And again, it is a nice tasting tomato, but it also looks beautiful when you've got a mix of tomatoes. So they're the ones that I'm growing for cherry tomatoes. Another one I used to grow is something called Green Sun. It's from the Sun Gold family, and it's called, I think it's called Sun Green tomato, and you used to be able to get them, but I can't seem to find the seeds anymore. So I'm going to have a little search around for next year. But Sun Green is also delicious, and it's a green tomato, and you think it's not very ripe, but when you taste it, it's deliciously sweet. So I'm going to try and track that seed down for next year, if I can. I don't know why some varieties just seem to disappear. Another controversial tomato, which is seen as a cherry tomato, is Brad's Atomic Grape, and it's very, very popular in the States. It's starting to be grown over here, and I think it's a little bit like Marmite. You either love them or you hate them. But I found that these succumb to the disease, and I think I didn't get very many tomatoes from this because I think it got some disease and I had to take them out. So I'm considering just growing a couple this year to give them another try to see whether, because I like Marmite, for me, it's a keeper or a move on. So they're the ones that I'm growing for cherry tomatoes. Another one I used to grow is something called Green Sun. It's from the Sun Gold family, and it's called, I think it's called Sun Green tomato. And you used to be able to get them, but I can't seem to find the seeds anymore. So I'm going to have a little search around for next year. But Sun Green is also delicious, and it's a green tomato, and you think it's not very ripe, but when you taste it, it's deliciously sweet. So I'm going to try and track that seed down for next year, if I can. I don't know why some varieties just seem to disappear. And then I have a few tomatoes that are mid-size, sort of about this size, smaller than the big beef tomatoes, but obviously larger than the cherries, because sometimes you want to just pop something into a sandwich or slice something on top of a tart or something. So I grow some mid-sized tomatoes as well, and I've got 3, questionably 4, but 3 that I'm going to show you. One is the honeymoon, which I talked to you about, which is a blight resistant type tomato, and very tasty. I was surprised that it actually tastes quite good as well as being blight resistant. I like Harbinger. That's another good tomato of mid-size. And the other one is a very tasty Paul Robeson. Again, these 3 tomatoes I've been growing for the last few years as my mid-sized tomatoes. The next section of tomatoes that I'm going to show you that I'm going to grow this year are more the larger tomatoes or beefsteak tomatoes. I think possibly 1 or 2 might be questionable about whether they're beefsteak or middle tomatoes, but you know, have a little look at them and see what you think. And as I said, it's always really difficult to choose because there are just so many delicious tomatoes. But one I've succumbed to this year as a new one for me that I've never grown before is something called Rebel Star Fighter. And I looked at this, looks like a really beautiful tomato. The review says it's very tasty, so I thought I'll give it a go. So that's the first one, and I'm not quite sure what size it is. It looks like a largish tomato. And then I have some favourites that I grow every year. One is Black Russian. So Black Russian tomatoes. They're really tasty, and this has been a staple for me for some time now. And I also have some seeds that I saved from last year, so those will go in. And Coeur de Boeuf is a French variety of sort of, I think it means beef heart or boar's heart, so it's a sort of heart-shaped tomato. Again, very nice. We make a lot of passata, a lot of tomato sauce, tomato soups. So some of these larger tomatoes are fantastic for doing that with. So Coeur de Boeuf is another one. And then it's about where to stop. Anis Noir, which is black pineapple, I think it means. And I grew this last year, but I forgot to label some of the tomatoes, so I wasn't quite sure which one it is. But the reviews on these are excellent, very good. So this year I'm going to grow them again and make sure that I label them properly so that I can taste them. I know that all the tomatoes that we grew last year were delicious, so I'm, pretty positive that this is going to be a really good tomato. I think they recommend growing it in the greenhouse, but I've never grown any of my tomatoes in the greenhouse really. I've always grown the majority of my tomatoes outside. So I'm adding this to my collection. And then another one is Black Beauty. And I was very surprised with this because I've had some black tomatoes before, and although they look great, particularly when you've got a mix of tomatoes, they tasted horrible or tasted very bland or of very little at all. But these last year were great. They were very tasty. But again, I didn't label them all because I was also given some seeds from one of the Turkish plot holders who also had some black tomatoes, and they were absolutely delicious. So I'm not quite sure whether I was eating the guy's tomatoes, the Turkish guy's tomatoes, or whether I was eating Black Beauty. And because I didn't label them properly, I didn't know. So I'm growing them both again to check. I've got a funny feeling, I don't know, that maybe they're the same tomato. and I guess I won't know that until I do a little bit of a side-by-side trial. But even so, sometimes there's so many varieties, it could be a different variety, but they're both yummy. So I'm very happy that he's given me some more of his seeds this year. So I'm going to grow both of those, and they're both beautifully black. And at the bottoms, when you turn them up, they're green, and then as they ripen, it goes like a pinky colour, and that's when you know that they're ready to pick. Very delicious. The next one on my list is Dr. Witchy. I think that's how you pronounce it. And these are big kind of yellowy orangey ones, and they do grow big, and they are super sweet. And I saved some seed last year, but I've also got a packet left over from when I bought them. So if these don't germinate, then I've got some more, and they are absolutely delicious. And this is definitely a repeater every year, and one of my staple tomatoes. And then there is Japanese black truffelli. Again, another very, very good tomato. A bit bigger than a mid-sized tomato, but beautiful. And then lastly, I have some seed here called Margarita's seeds. Now, this is a friend of ours from Bulgaria, and when she came back from a holiday in Bulgaria, she brought me back some seeds from some tomatoes that her, I think, mother grows on at home. Anyway, she brought me back these seeds, and they are big orangey red tomatoes, and they are super delicious. I have no idea what variety they are, so the friend is called Margarita, so I call them Margarita tomatoes. So I saved some seed from them last year, and I'll plant them again this year and hope that that they come up. So on the whole, they're my varieties that I'm going to be growing. There are a lot, and I'm sure when it comes to planting them on the allotment, I'll be scratching my head as to where I'm going to put them all. But it's very hard to cut them down. And every year I say I'm not going to grow so many varieties of tomatoes. It just doesn't work. And if you speak to any allotment holder that grows tomatoes, that is one of the biggest challenges, is reducing your varieties that you're going to grow. And if you're more successful than me, then please tell me how you do it, because I can't choose from some of these absolutely delicious tomatoes. So now comes the job of sowing your seeds, and you can put them in anything really. So for the ones I'm growing a lot of, I'm growing them in this small seed tray. But depending on how many you're growing, some of the tomatoes I'm only going to be growing a few, so I'm going to be using this just to put the tomatoes in. Or with a couple of the others where I'm growing a few more, I'm putting them into a slightly larger one. Or you could use a pot or anything really that you can put some compost in. I will put these into, I've got a little propagator upstairs, so I will probably pop these into the propagator once I've sown them. But you don't even really have to do that because the days are warming up now, and if you've got a bit of a sunny windowsill but not too direct sun, because you don't want the tops to bake. You need to keep the tops moist so that the seeds can germinate. That's really important. But if there's somewhere that's slightly warm, got some light, you can just pop them there on a nice little windowsill, and they'll still come up. So you don't have to have propagators or anything like that. Just grow in any old pots. The only thing that I would say that I found really different for this year is about compost. Because of partly because of COVID, because everybody started growing flowers and vegetables, did a lot more gardening, there was a lot of demand on compost. And also because this year, I think, or this year or next year, it's peat-free compost. A lot of people have tried to look at the compost that they're making, And I've found that a lot of varieties of compost that are peat-free haven't actually been very good. So I'm still trialling different packs or different varieties of compost to find something that works for me. At the moment, I've got a couple of light, I think it's a small amount of peat in it, but it's mainly made from other things like waste and wood and things, which some seeds haven't even germinated for me. Some of those bags are really poor. So just be aware that if your seeds don't come up, it may be you, it may be the seeds, but it could also be the compost. So unless you've actually used it a few times and you know it's a good compost, just bear that in mind, because there's a lot of compost out there now that isn't very, very good for seed starting. So a good compost, and hang on a minute, I'll show you 2 seconds. I use a little bit of vermiculite on the tops, but you really don't have to do that. Just the light sowing of compost on the top of your seeds, and that will be fine. But what I'm going to do is I will give my trays a water now, sow the seeds on top, and then put a light sprinkling of vermiculite. And I use vermiculite for 2 reasons. One is that it lets the light through, and the second is I can gauge more evenly whether the top of the soil is still moist and whether I need to just give it a little sprinkle of water. Because as I said, the seeds like to be kept moist, not wet, but moist, so that they can germinate. So you don't want them drying out. So I'm going to just go and give them a water, and I'll be back. So I've given the seed tray a good water. I probably won't water them again for some time, because you want the seeds to be damp but not wet. If they're too wet, you run the risk of the seeds rotting. So just give them a nice little water and then sow your seeds on top. So we're going to start with Gardener's Delight. I've got some seeds here, which I'm going to just put on top of the compost. And I must say, the other thing I found is that, I'm going to spread these out a little bit, that with the seed packets now, you pay a little bit more for the seeds, but also you get a little bit less seeds. So you get fewer seeds, but you pay more. But that's how it is. That's why you have to be a little bit sensible when you're sowing your seeds, a bit more careful, because seeds are very expensive now. So just where the seeds have kind of overlapped a bit, I'm just going to spread them out, because I've got the whole of this section, so I'll just put them out like this. Give them a little bit of room. Make sure none have strayed over into the other area. These won't be in here for too long. Once they start to germinate and I can handle them, I'll be pricking them out into individual pots anyway. So just checking that I've got all the seed. So that is Gardener's Delight. And the other thing which I've fallen foul of many a time is not labelling them. So remember to label them, because once they start growing, if you haven't got a label, all the tomatoes look exactly the same, and you may not be able to tell the difference. Well, you certainly can't tell the difference on many of the tomatoes. There's 1 or 2 that have slightly different leaves or slightly different colour on the leaf. If you're experienced, you can tell the difference, but on the whole, you won't tell the difference. So it's better that you make sure that you've got your labels ready and that you pop them in. So the next packet I've picked up is Moneymaker, and I'll pop these in. To this side. See if I can do it this way so you can see. check the packet is empty, which it is. And that's the label. And again, I'll just, where you can't really see that, but where they've overlapped a little bit, I'm just going to spread them out over here. Just move that over there so that I know that all of these are money makers. And then I've got the middle section ready for some Alice Craig. And I've got a couple of packets, whoops. I've got a couple of packets of Alice Craig, so I'll sew probably both of them. They weren't even in a packet. Sorry about that. So these are just loose seeds in here. I think these may have been freebies in a magazine. That's one. Again, I'll just move that over so that they're not too, spread them out. Problem of being right-handed, sorry if I cover up the camera a bit. Just do the other packet. So I don't want them to get mixed up. Go on, over there. That's where you belong. Let's finish off this packet. I should have put you on the other side really, because I'm right-handed. Is it? That's that packet finished. Come back. Oh, keep your eye on these seeds. That's it. That'll do nicely. Now, not all of these seeds will germinate, so I'm not too worried about having more than I need. And when they start to germinate, they'll be quite distinctive in which seeds they are. There's one poking up there. I'll just lay that down like that. And then a light sprinkling of vermiculite over the top. So you don't need very much. As I said, you don't really have to do this. Some people would say they don't do it, and that's fine. You can just get a little bit of fine compost and just sprinkle that over the seeds. That'll do just as well. But you'll see after a moment or two that the vermiculite changes a slight different colour. It'll go a little bit darker where it's moist, and then I'll just try to keep that colour consistent so that I know that the top of the seeds are damp. So that's it. That will go into a propagator or onto a windowsill, and they'll germinate nicely. Now I'm not going to show you all of the others because it's the same principle for all of them, and it could be very boring watching me sow a whole load of seeds. But I'll bring you back once they've started to germinate. Hang on a sec. I'll bring you back and show you them once they've started germinating, and then I'll prick them on and pot them up. So I hope you enjoy the different varieties that you're growing. Please, in the comments below, why don't you tell me some of the varieties that you're growing and that you enjoy, or you might want to recommend something for me to grow for next year. But enjoy your tomatoes and the many ways that we use and eat them, and until the next time, Thank you very much. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, happy growing.